Mr. Andreas. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, thank you. Well, welcome everyone.
How's life? We have a good amount of viewers right now. We've got about 50.
Oh,
So it's looking good. The I've had a pretty eventful stream thus far prior
okay.
to us starting. I've now punted two trophies on my brand new shit pile deck that I'm sure is a good deck. And my entire stream tells me it's trash, but I know it's good. I'm 13 and 2 with this stupid deck, but I keep punting my trophy round, and I've done it now twice in a row where I've made a misplay on my trophy round, and that's the example I was going to give you, or one of those two punts.
I mean, perfect, because you we talked about this maybe it's like a week and a half ago, or yeah, when talking about what to do for week two, you alluded to something where, oh, I'm making misplays. I think it's because I play too fast. Or what kind of habits can we build to kind of get around that for the most part? And I think that topic is amazing because a misplay is kind of like a result, right? I don't care necessarily about the result in itself. I care about what led you there. So this is no different. And I think that is a good topic to dig into and be curious about because
Yeah,
it it's probably going to be a multi layered answer or a solution,
yeah.
but we can kind of get to know more if we scratch the surface and having some fresh examples. I think is going to be quite useful. So
Yeah.
maybe we can start with the examples, and then I have a few topics to kind of shape the conversation and hopefully get us closer to the coveted truth.
Let's do it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can go to the replay. So let me know when you can see my screen.
Yeah, yeah, it's all good.
Cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up my Twitch actually because I think my VODs are a better place to look
Yeah, might
than
be.
the actual MTGO replay feature.
I thought the animate summoning sickness was the misplay.
Oh, maybe I should. I actually have an. Oh no, I just clicked something and now my moto's lagging. This is classic MTGO gameplay.
Yeah, it's you have to take the good with the bad. So now you have both animating the foil and the summoning sickness. So now
Oh,
you can't
we've
lose.
got to get rid of the animate foil. That's so we have two examples. We have one from 5 minutes ago. Okay, but the one from 5 minutes ago, I think is less of a misplay, but also an
Yeah,
egregious misplay. So
yeah.
I'll give you two, and you tell me which one you want to go to. Um, okay, but the one with the null drifter is whatever. That was garbage time. That one, I was pretty confident we were winning that game. But yes, it was a misplay. But that didn't. That's not as a tilting of a misplay
Okay, so
as the
we
misplays.
talked about this before. You mentioned the garbage time, the basically the like the metaphor from sports where it's all but a foregone conclusion, so you're kind of sleeping a little bit at the wheel. We've
Yeah,
talked a little bit about that topic before. You're aware of that, let's say, flaw, because my point will always be that on any given Sunday, that will be the difference between an opponent making a miraculous comeback or you slamming the door. That should be like the biggest motivation, right?
I do want to
Um,
point out before you continue that you said on any given Sunday as a European, which I think football fans around the world will appreciate. I don't know if you watch a lot of American football, but that's a
I
very
really
funny.
don't. I watch the NBA. That's it.
Oh, I would say because that's a very funny thing for a European to say, in my opinion.
I guess I watch some TV shows.
The because on any given Sunday is a very football thing. Okay, so let's go ahead. I have two examples. So the one example I have is against Painter, not against Painter, against a unknown opponent. I played a Chalice on 0, and the game was all but locked up. So that's one, and it should have been a Chalice on 1, and there was no reason for that to be on 0. I just played fast, didn't think about it because I got excited. And then the other one was I was against Tony. And game 1, we're fighting over resources. I have a Chalice on 1 and a Chalice on 0 because it's Tony. And I go to stock up, and he forces it. And I already have an Urza Saga in play. And I force the stock, and I stock up, and I have an Urza Saga in play, and I've got my two chalices out, uh, and then he forces my stock up. I have force blue card in hand, and stock up, and those are the only three cards I have is stock up, force blue card. So I force back to protect my stock up because in my head I'm thinking if he cares, I care. But the misplay was I actually wasted my force because the turn before he had actually went to discard because of my chalices. And so he was just doing that to get cards out of his hand and prevent me from getting an advantage. Because as soon as I force that, he instant untaps, plays ring, and the game is over.
Yeah, so
Because
that
it.
last example is pretty good because I like
Okay.
your instinct. Um, and also that's the one where you feel like there is the most at stake, right?
Yeah, I had two trophy games where I punted on my meme deck that is actually a good deck.
Yeah, so let's just let's pull up that one because there's a lot to dig into. And yeah, that sounds like a great example. Also, it sounds like that's the one you care about the most. So that's also that adds something. So whether you care about, getting to a certain record or beating a certain player or whatever, the one you care about is what I care about the most. I want to put it that way.
Yeah. So
Then before you find it, I just want to say that I have a speaking about a very European way to describe something. I also want to differentiate between what is a misplay, what is a judgment call that did not work out, what is, you know, the right play that didn't work out.
yeah.
Basically, trying to separate the what we knew at the time from the actual result. Um, so with that being said, of course, sometimes we make a suboptimal play and we get at a disadvantage, and sometimes we make a good play and we get to an advantage. So I'm just saying they're not always aligned. So let's try and dig into this a little bit. So first of all, do you have access to show your list just quickly from Magic Online?
Yeah. Let me go to Moxfield actually. I think it's has it in there.
Okay. So that's like I'm trying to basically
So
gather as
this
much
is my
context as possible. So let's see here. So we're playing a blue Stompy style Dreadnought deck using stock up to put together our combo. A little bit of Hull Breacher action here. Do we have combo with that card?
No, this was actually Oculus before because I have four
Okay.
Scroll of Fate, and the reason for this is because I wanted to run four Chalice of the Void. So the idea of the deck is turn one Chalice or something, or turn one Torpor Orb, and then Threat.
Can I read the Scroll of Fate, and why don't I know that card? Okay, so that's basically Illusionary Mask,
Per
modern version of that card.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Um, and and basically what this card lets us do is I can play Scroll of Fate and I can cheat into Dreadnought through a Chalice of the Void. In addition to that, I had the Oculus in here because it's a good threat to put in with Oculus, and
Right.
also is a way to turn like when I draw an extra Scroll of Fate or an extra Torpor Orb, it's a way of converting those into actual cards that do things.
Yeah, fair enough. Um, Okay, and then we lean on forces, chalices against combo, and Tony's a combo player, kind of
Hmm.
setting the table a little bit here.
And I've got
Okay.
like four Saga, four Seed of the Synod, four Ancient Tomb, two City, and I have a one of Cavern of Souls as a cheeky way of putting in my own Dreadnought through a
Oh yeah,
Chalice.
I definitely want to see that at some point, like through the chalice for one and jam the dreadnought. That would be
Oh,
amazing.
it comes up actually because the stock up lets us get there, since stock up lets us get any card. And then, but the most common way to bring it in through the thing, through the Chalice,
Mhm.
is Torpor, is a Saga or Scroll of Fate.
Right. Okay. So that was step one, and then we get to the game at hand. And which game are we talking here?
So this is
Um,
game one. Then we
Game
end up
one.
we end up going to three. Game two is a one-sided game. Game three, he gets an early ring, and then I just can't beat the ring.
Okay. So we're playing with suboptimal information here. You already have the chalice of zero, which is based on the player research,
Yeah,
I would imagine.
yeah, because it's against Tony.
And here comes a chalice for one. So at this point, we're expecting some kind of, coveted jewel type deck out of him, right?
Yeah. So I put the Chalice on zero since I'm on the play. Um, and so I didn't know what he was on, if he was on like Ruby Storm or something, or
Mm-hmm.
his most recent deck he was playing was Necro Dominant, so I put it on zero. But I knew I was gonna put it on zero and one. But I
Yeah.
think I drew the second chalice on the draw on my next turn, so I put my first chalice on 0 and called it a day.
So, first decision of the game here. Opponent casts Stock Up off of Studio Trader. So, first of all, he plays Studio Trader, so he does not have Ancient Tomb. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Him casting that card, do you have any knowledge about what he's up to at this point?
Yeah, at this point I know it's Jewel.
Okay, at this point, you know. Okay, fair enough. So, it's kind of a known entity that he's been messing around with a deck like that, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you let that resolve. What's the logic here?
I'm only scared of Ring.
Okay, so wow, Ursa Saga is a nice draw here. So now all of a sudden we have a plan. I was about to say without the Ursa Saga, we didn't really have a plan.
Yeah.
So this stock up, what are we looking to get here? We talked a little bit about casting cantrips with a purpose, and this is kind of the same. So are you looking to get like another force blue card? Are you ready to like turtle up behind that, or
Just
what are you hoping to
honestly,
get here?
if I can find like Torpor Orb Threat, if I can find I mean honestly it's really just Torpor Orb Threat or another Force Blue card. So I just cast it because like I've got nothing else to do with my mana this turn.
Yeah. So first of all, what's the purpose of playing Ursa Saga before resolving the stock up?
Oh, I don't actually know. I don't actually have a good reason for that.
Yeah, so that's just like some minor sequencing thing that will basically mask what you have gotten off of the stock up. If you do it the other way around, the opponent will suspect you took an Ursa Saga as one of the cards. Like that'll at least be in their evaluation and thus mask the force in your hand. Right now, you're just, giving your opponent free information. This is beyond the point. This is just something that, jumped to my eye.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's fair. The
Okay, so we're resolving this card with either the purpose of turtling up further or putting a clock on the combo deck.
yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. The
And then
opponent forced to pitch his show and tell. Okay,
so now
okay.
it's confirmed he's on shops.
Did you know that he was a show and tell deck?
Yeah, his shops deck is always a show and tell deck. I guess it's not a shops deck in Legacy, but it's the same idea.
Right, right. Okay, so let's try and think here. What is the purpose of the stock up? That is to either find protection, which would be, redundant, then forcing it through in order to find
Yeah.
protection,
Yep.
or to find something that advances your game plan while hopefully the chalices will take you there. But it also looks like he can actually beat those chalices. They're not necessarily the end of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
You already told me what you're losing to, and he just resolved a dig through time type spell.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things at stake here. I think the main thing is you had some kind of plan, then you drew the Ursa Saga and didn't update your plan enough.
Yeah.
Because that is actually the card that changes things, because that is your game plan of
Yeah.
winning.
And they're actually like a pretty beefy construct with 2 chalices and a Mox Opal.
Yeah. So let's say you just drew Basic Island off the top. Then I'm forcing here any day of the week because I have to do something.
Mm-hmm.
I would feel like I would have to, close out my opponent, because in the draw go, they will kind of get around whatever prison piece I have going on. But when you actually have the good draw go card already, it's kind of up to him to react. So I think that's where the solution lies here, and this is what makes it a, whatever you want to call this, a misplay or fail to refresh your game plan after a draw step.
Yeah.
That's kind of the semantics of it, but I think that's where you got lost here. So let's see. You force this through, and then you get to see 5 cards. Is that what happens next?
Yeah, so I force this and I think about it and I end up just saying like I'll just force back, like if you care, I care. But what I failed to realize was that the previous turn he actually went to discard with the Lotus Petal, so he has no action right now. And he hasn't been able to get to a 4th mana, so he's on 3. So he's just waiting to get to some type of way to cast something. So he's either got like the Jewel in hand, because he actually did, he discarded Show and Tell. He didn't even go for the Show and Tell.
Right. So yeah, okay. So good pickups here. So first of all, discarding a 0, which is, to be expected with some chalices out. Also, pitching a show and tell, out of a deck with, you know, probably a bunch of blue cards, but maybe it's the only blue card. We can't really know for sure. Also, the opponent has not had a chance to cast their main, let's say, threats yet. The opponent didn't have the chance to cast a show and tell. The opponent didn't have a chance to cast a One Ring. So you're playing off of like suboptimal information here. And if you force this, you're basically just crossing your fingers. Your opponent does not have, show and tell Jewel, Mana Source, One Ring. And that's the problem with this play, that the list of bad stuff that can happen is too long.
Yeah.
And the Urza Saga forced to will a One Ring. Also, I will say that the fact that the opponent has City of Traders, that's a big one, because...
If they play a land and they cast something, they're super behind because they can't play their mana rocks.
Yeah, so this is actually something where we can drag on our experience from playing against Mono Red, where if they lead on, City of Traders, then all of a sudden we want to wasteland the other land, right? If they have a similar situation like this, we want to wasteland the red land next to the city, so that their next play is kind of an all-in play, sacrificing their board. And by the same logic, this is even more juicy to then have a Force of Will for the threat you just told me is going to be the One Ring.
Yeah.
Most likely. The exception to that rule is they just go show and tell and don't play out more lands. Then, of course, that plan doesn't work. But if One Ring is on top of your list here, we can really blow them out by countering that card and leaving them behind.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of information here that leads me to agreeing with you and agreeing with the result.
That I should not have forced this.
Yeah, exactly. But because of we have the Saga, so we're actually getting somewhere when it comes to damage. They have these City of Traders. We know it's a One Ring deck. They can't get to 4 mana without playing a land. I assume, right? Yeah, I don't think they can.
Yeah.
Maybe they have do they play Monolith?
They do, but they would have to have land and Monolith because they can't play a key.
Yeah, but just Grim Monolith accelerates 1, right? So
with the City of Traders. Yeah, you're right.
You can go Grim plus One Ring here. So there's some combinations that are annoying, but at the same time, what card is going to win the game. And then you end up in a situation where you need your top 5 to actually have the protection, at which point it just doesn't make any sense, right? It loses its purpose because you actually need defense more than offense here.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting spot, and yeah, I would agree. You didn't do yourself any favors here. So we can file this under misplay. I think that's totally fair.
And then after this, I force this. He plays a ring, and then he copies, and then he just changes and then I just don't play the game anymore. The game's over.
Yeah, then we find a bunch of stuff that, in a vacuum, helps you win the game, but that's not, the rules because of the matchup, right?
Yeah. And then after this, the game is over. After this, he just chains. I think he gets like 6 or 7 rings in play.
Yeah, and that is obviously something that you opened yourself up to by spending your force here, and I like that you already highlighted what is most likely going to be the gap, which is if it's worth it for him to force, it's very often also worth it for me to force.
But in this case,
that's your go-to instinct here, at least, or something that the first thing you mentioned.
Yeah, and that was my go-to instinct, and I didn't think too much beyond it. But if I just paid attention to the fact that he went to discard, I would realize like his hand is clogged, and he might just be forcing 1 to beta force, and 2 just to get cards out of his hand so he doesn't have to discard.
Yeah, there's definitely a bunch of options there that we need to... What would the reason for the opponent be to do whatever play we're talking about? That's a lot to do with... We also talked about that a little bit with a card like Thoughtseize, is that a game of Magic is this information exchange, and I wonder why they would do this is a good thing to ask yourself when playing the game. Because, a seasoned veteran is not just forcing out of nowhere. So I think you did a good job trying to investigate, I wonder why he did that, and then your story at the time was he probably wants to slow things down. He's very, very hindered by the chalices. I'll power this through since it seems important for my opponent. Like that's not terrible logic at all. Um, so I mean, I understand how you got here. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things to be said about when should you have considered this. You should, in a perfect world, you think about, let me cast this draw spell. I'm not gonna fight over it, because my eye's on the prize here. But I'll play it. I don't know when did you consider this with his force on the stack or before? That's mainly what I'm curious about. When did you consider if you're gonna force or not? Like, what's your order of thinking when it comes to stuff like that? Are you a step ahead, or are you considering it when it happens, basically?
So I didn't even think about that he would force this, to be honest, because I didn't
Right.
think he would care about it.
Yeah.
But then he did, and it was like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't force here because I wouldn't care about this. Because there's like, I just wouldn't, because I would try to protect my combo if I'm the combo player, instead of trying to do this. So that was kind of the logic. Was maybe he was just trying to slow down the game because of the chalices and they're really hurting him. Because if he went to discard, it means the chalices are doing a ton of they're doing a ton of lifting here.
Yeah, so basically, funnily enough, because the play was unexpected, then that's why you didn't consider it beforehand, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I would not consider. It's kind of like if you're a combo player, would you force a brainstorm? Like probably not, right?
Yeah, maybe this is more comparable with something like I guess dig through time,
Yeah,
because you actually get. He's willing to take his meds on the -1 card rather than you digging into your deck and having selection and impulsing twice. It's a tough one. I'm totally on your side here. I wouldn't expect that at all, because what matters in this point is force of wills. From his point of view, again, like, yeah, that's what he's scared of. Then again, he's also working off imperfect information, and I mean, maybe he doesn't want to. At this point, he has no idea what you're on. Like, he could be scared of getting buried by, I don't know, thoughtcasts and thought monitors here. That's not insane to think about, right? That he thinks it's some kind of 8-cast. I don't know. There's a lot of lack of information. You seem to have a pretty good grip what he's gonna do.
yeah.
But he might have zero clue about what you're gonna do.
I mean, everyone that I'm playing against has zero clue what I'm doing.
Yeah. So we had to every time we see our opponent make a play that seems weird on the surface, we have to add that.
I actually, I fuck that up a lot. When people do really obscure plays,
Yeah.
my first instinct is, they must have messed something up.
Yeah.
But I frequently get punished for that.
That's a good one, actually. That's a good observation. I've had the same in Vintage where I basically go, wow, that's a terrible play. And that's just such a bad habit, because then chances of me getting, tricked or whatever just skyrockets.
Yeah.
But now I'm just like, okay, let's just assume I'm playing against, like, the best player in the world. Why would they possibly do this? So at the very least, I train my brain to kind of pick up on unorthodox stuff. So that's just good to never get lazy around weird plays from opponents. So that's actually a good one.
Yeah. So that was kind of like this I would say the other play that was kind of a punt isn't as I think as egregious as this, although pretty egregious still.
Yeah, this is mainly just trying to get away from as much, let's say, autopilot as possible.
Yeah, because this is a super autopilot. Like my autopilot is if they care, I care.
Which, is probably good, like 9 out of 10 times, I would imagine. Maybe 8 out of 10. It's very high, at least. If it's worth it for them, it's worth it for me, because why else would they do it? Because you give your opponent credit as a player. That's ultimately what it boils down to. So I don't think it's a bad rule of thumb, but as we talked a little bit about before, is rules, that's gonna win you games. Breaking them is gonna win you tournaments, is at least something that I live by. So I'm always looking for the exception to the rule because the rules is gonna be our compass to kind of steer through the sea of competitive Magic. But then we also have to throw that out the window sometimes and really lock in and Yeah, this was actually a very, very good example of how just one, rule that is good most of the time really isn't good here. And the Ursa Saga draw step was for me what changed it. Because if you don't draw that card, I don't think it's bad of you to force back here because you have to end the game in some way.
Yeah. So that was that. And then after this, game two, I win. Game three, he just gets like a turn one ring and then chains it to infinity.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's actually something I don't think I've mentioned before. I I have a phrase where I'm basically interested in winning the games that are up for grabs in Magic.
yeah,
Those
exactly.
games
Exactly.
where, oh, you just get one ringed. Okay, fair enough. I couldn't do anything. I had a sure keep. I got crushed. That's just what it is, right?
Yeah,
Um,
like a lot of games, like I'll have risky keeps where it's like this hand is insane. If I draw one blue mana, and most
yeah,
of my deck is blue mana on a relative basis,
yeah, stuff like
so
that where you're doing
yeah,
the right thing on the percentages. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But whether it works out or doesn't is not gonna, dictate whether it's correct or not. And separating that from what actually happened is tough because you can
yeah,
also use it as an excuse in with a bad reasoning. So we have to kind of separate what is actually something you would repeat in a heartbeat and what is something that might require a little more reconsidering. And yeah, this was a great one because your gut feeling when you played this was that you like punted the trophy or whatever the narrative is. So for me, whether this is a game at the kitchen table versus your 12-year-old nephew, or whether you're 4-0 in a league or playing the finals of a PTQ, it doesn't matter to me. But that is something that's like important or at least relevant to you. So of course we're gonna take that seriously, and that would have been glorious 5-0 with this deck that you've been putting some work into. Like I totally understand.
and then I had another. I'm right now 13-2 with my two losses,
That's
or
awesome.
with my two losses being the finals of the trophy. I know trophies don't really matter. Like in the end of the day,
No,
like you can just queue into
yeah,
like five fake deck. Like I'm not gonna lie, I don't think I can beat Eldrazi with this deck. Uh, like I can't beat a Sowing Myco spawn. So I don't think this deck is that serious. But it'd be cool to get
yeah.
some kind of like recognition on it.
And as that's one of the first thing I told you, we're doing this your way. I'm not here to dictate your, direction. I'm here to hopefully, elevate your game on that journey that you chose, right? So we want to stay true to that when we play a game. We don't
Yeah.
want to play the game or choose a deck based on what others would do. That's We're all unique. We all have our own lane, and so yeah. So hopefully we can turbocharge your lane.
Yeah, and to your point, right? Like I like that saying, the good heuristics or whatever, like wins games, but breaking the rules
Yeah, yeah.
wins tournaments.
That happens every time I do well. I played this weekend. I played some dual commander, and I was lucky to win a couple of tournaments. And I have like the good fundamentals, a really good understanding of how to play the relevant matchups. But then there's some times where I pick up on my opponent doing the same, and then you can kind of put fear in your opponent because I know that they know. And then all of a sudden I'm playing just like I would with a Days and Legacy or these phantom cards that we've talked about before, cards that have effect on the game without actually being in my hand. And
Hmm.
then I just got over the hump in some really tight matches, and it just every time I do well. Then I can't just, let's say, bread and butter win a tournament. Like that's never gonna happen. You have to at some point get creative in the right spots also, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. There's always like cheeky plays. Like I remember at Eternal Weekend, I had a really interesting line. I was playing against a really really good reanimator player. Do you know Bob Huang?
Oh, for sure.
We had a very really close game one in our set in Eternal Weekend, and he had a play where he reanimated. The only card he had in the graveyard was a Balgavoth, but it's still like a house, right? So I had a stifle and a plow in hand, and he went for anime dead. And I didn't worry about days. I had more than enough mana to pay for days. Um, He had a stifle and a reanimate in hand. I had a stifle and a plow in hand. So I'm thinking I could either stifle the animate dead trigger, or I can wait for my turn and plow the Valakavoth and stifle the ward trigger. And in my head, I went for the plow the ward. I mean, stifle the ward trigger and plow the Valgavoth because I think the virtual card advantage in that moment is better. Because if I just stifle this and he has another reanimate, I'm just cooked. And I ended
Yeah,
up
so you
going
want
for
to
the
get it gone for good. You invest more resources, but you get it gone for good.
yeah. I figured my virtual card advantage in a dedicate again because he wasn't on frogs. He was like turbo blue black reanimator. So I figured my virtual card advantage of just getting rid of it completely is going to be way better than saving the single card in my
When
hand.
you're seeing virtual card advantage, is the fact that he can draw more reanimation,
Exactly.
which would be useful, not useful rather.
Exactly. So virtual, that's what I call virtual card advantage.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And also because Plow has no good targets against Reanimator if they already drew 15 cards off their target. So that stuff like that, right? Like I think my first instinct is generally stifle the animate dead, but in that moment I was like, in this specific case, because it's Valgavoth and it doesn't actually impact the board immediately, I think I should be patient here, and it ended up paying off.
Yeah, so great call on something that, let's say we were the day before that tournament talking about, oh, what can Stifle possibly do in the format? Like, this would not be on our list that you would be countering that ward ability, right? So
Yeah.
this is just, again, you breaking outside the box in a unique scenario you might never encounter again. And that's why we need our, proper basically the amount of like energy we have available, and that's why we need good habits, good practice to like do all the standard stuff so that you can actually go in the tank and find a play like that under pressure. This is a little bit about what I prepared for today about you know play speed and habits and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And actually a good example of that is Daniel Gutschel, Guldukat.
Guldakat. Yeah, I love that guy.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's so much inspiration to get from a guy like that. I remember during COVID there was a lot of online PTQs. Back then the super
Mm-hmm.
qualifiers were actual PTQs.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on a call with some of my Danish buddies, Thomas and Michael, the Death and Taxes masters. Michael was playing the PTQ and he faces Skull Dukat in the finals. And this tournament or this match rather, Daniel's very fast with all small stuff, and then at some point he just wins into the tank for like 8 minutes. And at that point, it's just my friend is sitting there. They're playing a finals of a PTQ, and the opponent's just not doing anything for 8 minutes. Then comes back and like makes their best play, and that was just very inspirational because him playing at such a high speed with resolving it was a Delver versus control matchup, so like he knew what to do with his cantrips, he knew what was correct. And then there was this extremely hard decision that was gonna either send him to the PT or send him to bed, and he just took 8 minutes to make that decision. And that was just very inspirational that he allowed himself for that time to be totally reasonable thing to do for crunch time, right? He saved it for the absolute
Yeah.
most important decision. And I do some of the same when I play specifically Doomsday in Vintage, because making that pile covering as most angles as possible is just so crucial. If you if you
100%.
if you forget about something, you can get punished right away, right? So I try and play very fast with my set up preordains, make my land drops, this and that, like standard stuff to allow, and then have a bunch of time for the actual super hard decision where I have to, oh, I already pitched this card, so that's not a possibility. What's in the opponent's yard? What's in the opponent's deck? How can we cover as many angles as possible? So that's basically where the chess clock comes in, but that's only for Magic Online, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the other side of that coin is, so to just set the table here, we're playing Magic in different arenas. Sometimes we have 25-minute chess clocks. That's online. Sometimes you have to, well, or at least you choose to interact with audience. Sometimes you have something to fix away from the computer. I'm just saying all of that stuff will take away your focus from the actual chess clock. So, but that's kind of up to you to manage, right?
Right.
Where if you go to a paper tournament, then all of a sudden, oh, we have, I don't know, warnings stacking up, game rule violations. Judges are there to enforce slow play on either, you or the opponent, or both.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's going to be very subjective whether they actually do it, because it's a very hard thing to determine. You don't have 3 minutes to sideboard. You have an appropriate amount of time to sideboard. Um, you cannot spend, you know, all. You basically need to proceed the game in a timely manner. You don't. You're not a. You don't decide over your own time, basically. So it's two different ways of playing Magic. This is one of my good friends, Thomas Enevolts, and he once told me before I started playing Magic Online. He said, "Magic Online, yeah, that's a video game that's kind of like Magic," which is like the best explanation you can ever give, because so much stuff is the same, but so much stuff is different.
Yeah.
So it's just tuning your brain into, huh? Okay, so I'm playing on Magic Online. I'm interacting with chat. Let's just say you're playing a slow deck or a complicated deck. How do I manage my clock here so I don't sit there with, 4 minutes left and then I have to make some hard decisions? How do I put myself in a position to have proper amount of time to come to a good, good decision? And also, I will say, you don't get any extra points for finishing a match with 19 minutes on the clock.
Yeah.
Like that's just, you don't get the extra points. So you need to kind of choose whether you want to be fast and accept, you know, mess ups, or you want to be less fast but then get the decision right more often. So there's also something to do with some people glorifying being fast. Oh, my opponent's so slow, this and that. But in reality, they can do whatever they want and beat you with 5 seconds left on the clock. It's just how that game works, and you should also think a little bit more about how to utilize your clock, because it's a resource thing. You work full time, you have other stuff to do than Magic, you're entertaining a chat, you're putting out content. All of this stuff you have to balance while making good Magic plays. It's very hard. So it's a combination of being aware of how to kind of dose your resources, and also just, being a bit more like, forgive yourself or cut yourself from slack. I think you have to, no matter who you are, kind of find a perfect combination of that, where it's like, oh, okay, well, I did get up at 3 a.m. to play this vintage tournament, so, well, I couldn't play my best. That's pretty normal. Like, sometimes that would be my situation. And everybody has different situations. That's kind of the point, that you're, the product of what you're putting forward, which is how I describe the plays you're able to make. We all make our best plays, but whatever we did throughout the day, how much we slept, whatever we had for dinner, all our habits that we try and, get more accustomed to, how to go in the tank, how to play in the proper speed, all of that goes into the product we can put forward, which is then the plays we make. So that's kind of the end result. So again, we want to focus on the stuff in the middle that gets us to the end result. And yeah, I think just dosing yourself and being aware is going to be useful. I don't know, what's your feeling? Do you generally think you play fast, or do you think you get stressed by the time? Like, where are you at on that spectrum?
I think in paper, so in paper, I've noticed, and I forgot to message you about this, but I tend to play a lot better in paper. Like when I was at Eternal Weekend, I think in all of the games that mattered, when I say that, I mean like in my last few games, once I was out of top eight, I just stopped caring. Like once I picked up my second loss, I just didn't care anymore. Like I was
Yep.
kind of mentally checked out, which I probably shouldn't have been, because I would have gotten top 32 pretty easily for my $1,000 promo. But in my head, when I was so close to top eight and I lost
Yeah.
it, it was so hard to motivate myself to try.
Yeah.
But in all the games that mattered, I actually believe I only made one misplay that entire first day, and that was the only game that wasn't, because I had one draw, and the one game where I made a misplay was the game that I drew instead of won. And that went to time because it was a blue black. I was playing blue black reanimator, and I had a pretty good record. I actually had no losses to the deck all of Eternal Weekend, and I played some really good players on it too. Um, and that was my only draw, and it was because I made a misplay with a Tameo where I should have picked up something instead of uptick, and that was the only time. So I do pride myself in paper. I play fast and I play efficiently and I play correctly
Yeah.
when the need arises for it. Um, I would say online I play very sloppy because I'm more interested in having a good time and doing all
Yeah.
this. But also there are no stakes. Like there's no stakes online until I get to my trophy game.
Hmm.
And even then, it's like, it's not the same. And the other thing too is like I'm very dialed in paper, and just by nature of like streaming and playing and thinking about other things, of looking at my phone or just like thinking about what
Yeah.
music I want to play next, I'm just not nearly as dialed in online. And it's
Yeah.
something that I'd like to get better at, because I do think like there is something to be said about people don't want to watch sloppy play. Um, so
I'll
for
I'll
the
I'll I'll, I'll actually put it in the other. It's just a matter of how like basically the order of words or so I'm just gonna say people love high level gameplay.
yeah,
We're saying the same thing, but we are motivating our mind to do the right thing rather than motivating our mind to please don't do the wrong thing, right? So
yeah,
this is just like it's kind of basic, but it's something that I took from my previous job. I worked with a lot of kids who had a tough time, and then it's way better to if they go, "Oh, I don't know how to do math," and then it's like, yeah, tomorrow we are practicing math. That's gonna be cool. Like we're saying the same thing, but I'm putting positive mind thoughts into their brain, and
yeah.
that's what we want to do. We want to motivate ourselves to do better. We don't want to do the opposite, where it's like, oh, I hope I don't mess up, right?
and
So
and I think, yeah, and that's very true, right? Like having the positive mindset, like that makes sense. Like I want to play better instead of I don't want to make mistakes. Or
yeah,
like when
exactly.
you tell
It's
your
that simple,
record,
really.
like when you tell your record to your friends and you say I'm X1, everyone is like that's
Yeah,
crazy, but in the end I'm thinking like the only number that matters is the losses. The other number, it doesn't matter how many wins you have. What matters is how many losses you have, and
yeah,
that's something. Again, I say that Eureka 22422 Mike, he said that to me at a tournament weekend where it's like I really hate that we go by how many losses we have, because it just
hmm
makes you feel like shit no matter what.
yeah. It's the same. It's the same thing. It's looking for the flaws rather than celebrating
The wins.
the good things, right? And that's actually you can use that in whatever aspect of life, and I promise your life quality will go up because all of a sudden you're looking at the bright sides and the potential to grow and what's we're going to improve, we're going to be a better version of ourselves tomorrow, and all of that stuff is going to spiral into good things where the opposite is the case if you're talking about all the flaws, and that goes for magic and elsewhere.
Yeah. No, that's very true. Like, but to answer your question, to be more like definitive, I think online I play pretty fast because I
Yeah,
value being able to look at my chat and see what people are saying, and then go back to the game. Like it actually kind of works out well, except for the fact that Magic is a very complicated game, and generally speaking, on Magic Online, you're going to get above average players, because if someone is dedicating the time to playing on Magic Online, they're already probably in like the top 5-10% of players in the world, honestly. Um,
yeah, I'll say the same. It's Magic used to be like 100% like a social thing, and then whoever plays on Magic Online, they're kind of at the next level of serious about their hobby.
Yeah, like I enjoy Magic because the people, obviously, but I really just enjoy Magic because it's a fun puzzle game. It's a fun
Oh
problem
yeah.
solving game. And for me, like a lot of that is the deck building, right? Like deck building is something that I find a lot of enjoyment in. Like when Bosch and Roll got his top eight with the Esper Cypher list that I had played and that I had kind of built and worked on. And shout out to Horgio who sent me the blueprints to that list. Um, the he yeah, the when he top eight, when Boshrell top eighted, I felt like I had top eighted Eternal
Yeah,
Weekend, because I felt
perfect.
so good about that, because I was like, I
Yeah,
know this deck is cracked, and I could have got there if I could have just dodged the second hard control player in the room. Because I recognized that. In fact, it was one of those things where I didn't even respect it in my sideboard because the matchup was so heinous that I'm like, you know what? If I'm gonna play against hard control, like the Snapcaster Mage Plow pending Teferi decks that don't really have a real win condition at Eternal Weekend, like I'm not going
yeah,
to hedge against that because it's already such a small, and my hedge is barely giving me percentage points.
yeah.
Um,
And I think that's reasonable. That's actually one of the best examples of I think you did all the right stuff in the middle, and then the result was just, unfortunate. The result being that you got queued into a deck twice that was probably a 2% deck of the field. That is just unfortunate. It doesn't take away from your decisions in deck building. So while
yeah,
it can be a moot point and somebody would be, I just think that's a win in my book. that you basically you didn't account for such a small percentage of the field, super niche. I will say though, you getting a draw earlier in the tournament did not help you
No,
when control is your worst matchup. That's where you had
that's
a
actually a
responsibility.
really good point. Oh
You had a
my god.
responsibility by not getting a draw on paper. That's
Yeah.
simply, if you play Magic at like a high level, that's just unacceptable. You cannot get a draw because that means you either were too slow yourself or didn't utilize the judges like the best you could have. So that's where the agency lies in that, in my opinion.
I agree. And that's something I didn't really think about. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and lie and tell you that I think we both played at a good pace and the game just grinded to a halt. But the game really grinded to a halt at one point on our
Yeah,
board. We had both had two barrel glyphs staring at each other with no other
yeah,
permanents in play, no other cards in hand. So it's like we're just literally playing draw go for like 10 turns until someone
and
gets something.
yeah, and that is exactly when in a perfect world, you have the gear of like playing super blitz. So actually, Eternal Weekend. Let's see. That was actually. Wait a minute. When was this Eternal Weekend? Was it this one or
This
the previous one?
this last one in December.
Oh, okay. So I didn't go to that one. I was doing commentary, but the year before I went to the US and played. I played Vintage in a Lura's Mirror, which is insanely grindy. So I played against an Italian guy that we know of each other, and I just said, let's make sure we finish in time. Let's shortcut everything we can, and we don't have to ask permission to resolve like moxes or crack fetches. We just play because we want to finish, and he was up for that. So we played like Blitz Magic, and we obviously we got there and we finished in time, but also we didn't play perfect, but both of us preferred actually finishing. So there's some if you have that gear and you can be like, okay, let's shortcut everything, fetch underground C, and the ponder's already on the table, right? Like you basically speed things up, right? Um,
Yeah.
so
But
it's possible. It comes with experience, of course.
yeah, I mean, I again, like obviously like it's hard for me because I'm going to be biased, but like I didn't go to time in any of my other rounds. In fact, I had like 20 minutes left over
Yeah,
in most of my other rounds. I truly felt that game because we only got to game two, obviously. We never got to game three. We finished game two with like 2 minutes left on the clock, and we were like,
yeah,
"Do you want to try to finish this, or do you want to just go to the bathroom?" And I'm pretty sure we both agreed, let's just go to the bathroom and relax for next round. Um,
yeah. It's of course. I wasn't there. You were there. I'm basically just saying. It sounds like we don't have control over the pairings, but we do
yeah,
have control over you know, you could have taken more risk in that match. You could have played faster. You could have asked the judge to watch the match. Like,
yeah,
but you obviously felt like it was fine, and then all of a sudden, there's not enough time, right? And the games were grindy as well.
yeah.
So it can be a combination of a lot of things. But I think when you're playing a deck like that, where getting to the draw bracket is actually disastrous, you should be even more like that's one of the first thing I would be thinking about when I don't care. I'll just play super fast, and then if my opponent is like mono red prison, then I don't have to play fast, but I'll just play super fast as a default, basically,
It's a
if I
good
play a
point.
deck that really doesn't want to hit the draw bracket.
Yeah, and that's a really I didn't even think about that. Like, yeah, I cannot be hitting the draw bracket on Stifle, not because I cannot beat control.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's actually funny because you told me this before, like how your tournament kind of ended, and
yeah,
I didn't, but I didn't think about that draw. Maybe I forgot about that detail, or you didn't tell me the first go around. I can't remember.
no, I think I just left it out because I just didn't think it mattered. In the end of the day, like
Right.
because I was X11, and that's still live for top eight. Which actually at this Eternal Weekend, X11 wasn't live for top eight. There was two X11s that didn't make it.
Yeah, that is also crazy.
There needed to
The
be one
demand.
more round. They because we had 1,200 players and we only had 11 rounds. We needed 12 rounds.
Yeah,
But
definitely. You want everybody on X11 to make the
yeah,
weight, in my opinion.
yeah,
In a perfect world. There's also something about reducing variance, so I'd rather have one round too many than one round like less, right?
yeah, yeah,
There's a lot of logistics that goes into it. I think they even expanded. Like used to, I think it had like 1,100 spots or whatever, and then they magically came up with 100 more. So there's obviously a lot of things there where the tournament being more popular than expected is a good thing. But then
yeah,
how do you accommodate the players in that, and when do you have to pack up the stuff, and what about the
yeah,
broadcast? They already told people how long that we were going to work, and stuff like that. There's a lot of
yeah, yeah.
logistics that goes into
And I
that
don't.
goes into that.
Yeah. And I'm not going to blame them, right? Like, if you can make 100 people happy by giving them access, you're going to make four people sad by messing up their X11 record. And in
Yeah,
general, like, I think it's better to make 100 people happy than 4 people happy.
Yeah, and Magic players oftentimes fail to realize that. So that's
Yeah,
just something everybody should take note of. That if you individually are worse off, chances are that the big corporation who needs to pay the bills made some calculated decision around that. So a
yeah,
lot of Magic players think they're, what do you guys say in the U.S., that they're the main character? Is that the phrase?
yeah. We call them. Yeah, that they're the main character.
That is Magic players in a nutshell for sure.
The but yeah, I mean, no, overall though, I think I was pretty happy. Like I play a lot better in paper when the stakes are high. Like when I was at the Magic Cup this last weekend, although admittedly I didn't play that well in my last few rounds, but I'll also chalk that up to I wasn't really taking it that seriously. I wasn't eating. I didn't like really prepare. Like when I was at Eternal Weekend, I was like very prepared physically to play that many rounds,
Hmm.
and I was like and I had a lot going on too, like behind the scenes. Like I had a good breakfast, I had a smoothie, I had coffee, I had snacks. Like I was very
Yeah.
I was very like dialed in that I was gonna take all the points I could get from like the taking care of yourself aspect. And the other thing too when I'm playing online too is one thing that I've noticed as I get older, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this, is that it takes a lot longer and it's a lot harder for me to be in my best mental condition after like a strenuous time. So, like for instance, today at work,
What is that word? I'm familiar with that word. Strenuous.
so let's say I was playing in Magic tournaments and like kind of exhausted all weekend, and even like when I'm playing in casual events, I'm still thinking really hard. Just sometimes, obviously, the quality of my thinking isn't there. And then I
Yeah.
came to work today, and I was like, "Wow, dude, I'm in a brain fog. Like I can't even do basic stuff at work right now. I'm so out of it." And even after only, and I got a full night's rest. But in my head, I'm thinking, is this because I was just so tired all weekend from playing and like not taking care of myself and not eating that it's like
Yeah.
seeping over? Because in my youth, when I was like in my 20s, in my teens, I could like
Yeah.
do a bender all weekend and I'd be in
Oh
Monday and
yeah.
I'm like, I'm fine. I'm ready to tackle the
Sure.
world Monday
I
morning.
I remember that, like sleeping on some gym floor, traveling
Yeah,
to another
yeah,
country, playing
yeah.
back-to-back tournaments, and then side event in the evening,
Yep,
even go out for beers, and then 4 hours later back on
yep,
the horse.
yep.
So yeah, definitely a big thing, and that also it's just important to know your own strengths and limitations so that you can account for it. That's basically it, right? Because you don't want to be, oh, I'm a big Superman, and then learn that you're not. Like, you want to nail it. Like, what am I capable of, and what precautions do I take to kind of facilitate that? How do I stay true to my amount of resources? And I think it's good that you're noticing a difference because then you can account for it. Um, that's the main thing in Magic. You need to, it's the same with managing expectations. So I've heard you say today that both you're interested in eliminating like some brain farts so you can get over the hump.
Yeah,
Whether that's what do I know, at Eternal Weekend, or getting a trophy for a brew you've been working on. Like, you're motivated at that, but at the same time I also hear you saying, yeah, there's no stakes, or when I got my second loss, I lost interest in the tournament, or like there's something about you. You're on some kind of journey to find what's your motivation,
yeah,
and how do I even expand on that motivation, or how is it defined? Like, there's something there where a lot of Magic players are like, they tell themselves they're kind of somewhat casual, but then when they lose a match, they get frustrated. So obviously they have some ambitions, right? So we want to get to as close as possible to seeing eye to eye with and staying true to our emotions and our motivation within the
yeah,
game, because otherwise you're just going to feel like the glass is half empty when, oh, I'm just streaming, I'm having fun over here, and then you still kind of get annoyed, or whatever the proper word is. Like, we want to nail it down to how much do we care about the game, how do we facilitate that to make the most of it, and how do we stay true to that so we don't, so we're not one, like, half a step behind on
right.
our emotions and stuff like that. So there's a little bit. It's hard because for you, you care about, like, oh, Eternal Weekend, that's high stakes. You prepare, you
Hmm.
set yourself up, you treat it like a sport.
Yeah,
And
very
then when
much
you turn
so.
on, the stream, it's more like, oh, main priority is something else. But then when you get close to the finish line, you kind of want both. Then at that point, you kind of want both.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. That's very accurate.
It's very interesting because Magic is about getting to know what is my relationship with the game. I spent a lot of years doing this. I was messing around. I didn't take it seriously at all. I played like a lot of computer games. I wanted to go to parties, uh, hook up with girls, all of that. And I thought I was a champ at playing Magic at the same time, but I really wasn't. I just randomly rolled up to the store and borrowed a deck like once a week. But I still had expectations, like I was a professional playing the game every day. And obviously, I got hurt a lot by not getting over the hump and not doing as well. But I didn't take the game seriously, so who am I to expect to do well, right? So at that point, I started to develop and be more conscious of what is my ambition within the game. Okay, my ambitions are this. What do I have to do to facilitate that? And then I started to match those two things, right? My input and my output, right? So I got closer to who am I when it comes to Magic, and I think everybody will benefit from that. Like, why am I playing this game? What's my main motivation factor, and how do I accommodate that with my behavior?
No, and yeah. And I think about my motivation too. It's like my motivation it's just so hard to say because like I'm motivated because I want to be a better player. I don't want to be making silly misplays. I want to be able to prove that like, and also there's a pride in like playing well and getting the trophy on the deck. I know trophies don't really mean much, but
Yeah.
it's still like there is some pride there. Being able to say like I can do somewhat decently and get the trophy.
Also,
And
you
like
want to do things your way. I think that's important to mention.
I'm very much I'm
You're
very much
creative. You play Magic in order to kind of that's just kind of your space to get creative, to beat the odds, to prove that there's not one way to do it, right?
yeah. It's true there's not one way to do it. Prove because when I wrote the article on Bosch General's Patreon about that deck, about the Esper Siphon deck, the one thing I said is that like Moto is not always right, and a lot of people use it, especially in Legacy, because it's the it's the hallmark. It's like where all
Yeah.
of the Legacy is played.
Yeah.
But I remember I was thinking about this coming up to Eternal Weekend. Why is it that in every Pro Tour there's almost this breakout deck? In almost every other Pro Tour, there's a breakout deck that no one was expecting. Whether it was the last Chicago Peak Pro Tour where Vampires was the breakout deck, or this last one where everyone thought Zur was the worst deck and it was bad and no one was playing it online. And then out of nowhere, it's the best deck in the format.
Yeah.
And that got me really thinking. It's like obviously there's like all these teams and there's like actual like a very viable amount of money behind these innovations and these decisions and the deck building. But it got me thinking. It's like they don't have anything that I don't. Like sure they have a group of people and they have their spreadsheets. They have all these people testing, but they're all testing in 1 week's worth of time. Could one person playing a deck in a format like Legacy where it's much more where it's where there's it's much more malleable, right? So like things aren't going to change as frequently in Legacy as they are in Standard by nature of the beast. So my logic was I can break the format because I could do 20 team to 20 people's worth of work on a deck in if they can do it in 1 week, I could do it in 20 weeks, right? That's kind of like obviously it's not a perfect science, doesn't always work out like that, but I think
Yeah.
I can work on a deck and make it good in 20 weeks. Because they say what 1,000 hours to master something. I easily put 1,000 hours into that Stifle Knot deck and just try tweaking even like one card here or there, like spending 15 hours on whether I wanted to play two Thoughtseize or one Thoughtseize. And ultimately, that deck, like, I kind of proved to myself that it's possible to do it in Legacy. And I had a few people even reach out to me and be like, dude, you made me realize that I shouldn't just listen to what everyone is saying about decks because everyone would have told you Stifle Knot is bad, Curie is bad, but now find me a Stifle Knot list that isn't running Curie, right?
Yeah, and I mean that's perfect because then you have a great idea of what is fueling you. You're seeing some tendency from the professional scene. You're trying to apply it in within Legacy. Obviously, things are a bit different as you described, and then you're trying to find your lane there. And I think that is something that inspires people, and it is something you should keep doing because at the end of the day, you're gonna have an easier time finding your fire compared to somebody who is just, going to MTG Goldfish and finding whatever won the last challenge and
Yeah.
then loading that deck up, right? Then you have some more when it comes to like passion.
Yeah.
And in order to be successful over time and consistent and staying like, then I think that's a great way to do it. Um, Talking about myself a little bit, I've kind of done the same now, where every Friday I'm playing like a more, let's say, experimental brew, whatever you want to call it, a brew or an untested idea on my channel, and that's exactly the same, is to reignite some of the creativity and some of the motivation that you're alluding to here. So I can definitely relate to that when it comes to sustaining your passion in a game like Magic.
Can I give you a deck for this Friday?
Yeah, let's go. I'll postpone the one I already had planned.
Let me give you this masterpiece. I'll send
Yeah,
it to you. Here, you can still see my screen, right?
yeah,
This masterpiece of a deck.
yeah, for sure. I'll because that's exactly the thing. I want to get back to, like, getting into the sandbox, having the fun with it, um, where the purpose is to hopefully find a diamond in the rough. Last Friday, I played a cool band deck that I was able to crush the opponents with, like Plagon, if you're familiar with that card.
Yeah, the draw cards, ETB draw cards equal to the amount of creatures that have toughness greater than power.
Yeah, exactly. So I played a band 80 card Nadu deck with that card. Stoneforges, Tamios, Mana Dorks, and that was just awesome to get back to fooling around, but also seeing if there's something there. Like, the combination of that, I think, is what you're looking for, where it's like you have this drive, and then whenever you're onto something, that's when, like, your fire really is
Uh,
burning the most, right? When it's like, oh,
yeah,
this is actually the real
yeah,
deal. Okay,
no, 100.
log in, guys. This started as like pure fun, but now it developed into something that can crush the
So
top decks.
I was off Stifle now for a while. Obviously, the you can, I don't know, you can't really see here. You might be able to see from my, oh, you can't actually see my camera, but I'll show it to the stream. But obviously, the Phyrexian Dreadnought is like my favorite card. I have the print right there on like my desk. I should probably move
Yeah,
it
that's
so it's
amazing.
so you can see it, so people can see it. Um, but but I was kind of off the deck, and then I was messing around in another deck, and I got two trophies. Now, obviously, I keep saying trophies as if they mean something. And I know I know, like, not deep down, but I know, like, they don't really mean much because 5 game sample size is relatively nothing in the grand scheme of things, especially when you're not playing against only the best decks. Um, but because of the way my schedule works, that's the only metric I really have.
Yeah, and
Um,
and, and that's going to be individual. So let's say you were aiming to become the most powerful magician in the world, and all you cared about was percentages, this and that. Then you can argue that leagues are not, you know, the end all be all. But for your situation, I think it's a good way to explain it. For your situation, it's the only metric that you, like, on a daily basis can chase. So
right.
that's like that makes it important to you, and that's, again, it's Magic is about different perspectives.
The but I had two trophies back to back on a version of the deck that had more traditional Stifle Knot stuff. Like, I had Tamios, I had Brainstorms, I had Curie, I had Doorkeeper Thrall, but I
Right.
specifically had two Ancient Tomb, two Torpor Orb, and two Urza Saga. Because I really wanted the play pattern of turn one Ancient Tomb, turn two Null Drifter, or turn one, um, turn one Torpor Orb, turn two Null Drifter.
Yeah, sure. So you set yourself up with, like, trying to visualize how the 1-2 punches can
Because
go, and you tweak your numbers accordingly.
no deck can beat that. The only favorable way to interact with that is you have to stop the Torpor Orb. And how many people are forcing a Torpor Orb out of an Ancient Tomb on turn one? Like, right, like, if I go Ancient Tomb Torpor Orb and you have Force in your hand, do you force that?
No, I probably don't.
And then if
I
I
would
go
probably go for what's coming after.
and I play Null Drifter, what happens?
Then it's a sad time.
Yeah, so that's the idea of the deck. And so I in the blue white version I had removal, I had Tamios, whatever. Like, it was much more of a
Yeah.
traditional deck. But I thought, what if I played Chalice? And what if I went all in on Ancient Tombs? And then the only reason this deck can even function is because Stock Up. Because Stock Up is another banger of a card to play with Ancient Tomb. And
Yep.
so that was kind of the inspiration for the deck.
Yeah. Perfect. This is funny because this is going to inspire people as well. Just your like the order of, oh, this two card combination is cool. How do I accommodate that? Oh, this new card has two colorless in its casting cost, and this deck can sometimes struggle with actual, card
Getting the combo pieces.
getting the right cards, but also
Yeah,
just the fact that we want more cards. We're a Force of Will deck that needs to recoup, or we are a deck
exactly.
that mulligans sometimes. Like this checks a lot of boxes. Okay, and then you kind of go step for step. So this is actually a good lesson for everyone that I want to highlight on how to start like a brew basically. And I think everybody will benefit from that from time to time. I did it with the Plagon deck where I played against a guy, and I haven't done this in like 10 years, but I asked for his Discord, and then we talked a little bit about back and forth about the deck. And then there was some stuff, I had some ideas he never thought about, and then we kind of put that together into this 80 card pile. And that deck looks pretty darn solid. Like just getting into the tank about, oh, what's like good cards to play with higher toughness than power that are actually solid cards. We don't want to play like random crap because at that point we're giving up too much. So we kind of built the deck bit for bit as well, and it's a similar process where you get to be creative with the greatest game ever.
Does Plagon trigger itself?
Yes, it counts itself if that's what you're asking.
I mean, I don't think I could run it in my deck, but now I'm thinking about some other stuff. But anyway, um, I
Exactly. That's a good one, right? I got beat by a guy who played like Noble, Tameo, Plagon, buried me completely, and that got me thinking about some stuff, and I put together a deck, right? And now we're talking about it. Like that's what Magic is supposed to be. You know, person to person, getting inspired, not trying to copy anybody's homework, but getting inspired.
yeah, for sure. And I think like I don't know, like the to kind of circle back to about the like the original topic of like misplays and making
Yeah.
mistakes. Just because I know we're coming up on time, I don't want to take any more of
Yeah.
your time.
Yeah. It's good. Let's wrap up. Yeah. You have the mic.
The I think the big thing I learned too is just like because what you said was like 8 out of 10 times your first instinct is correct, but it's the times where you have to think about your first instinct that are going to win tournaments.
Yeah.
And that's something.
I firmly believe that. Whenever I'm trigger happy, chances are I left some risk on the table. So yeah, you really need to think about every scenario as it's a unique occurrence. I've worked with a lot of players who want to build these rules of, oh yeah, in this matchup I do this, then they do A, I do B. But in reality, there's going to be a unique game of Magic in front of you that you need to win. So those rules will only get you so far. So I
Right.
always encourage people to treat it as a unique occurrence.
Yeah. And it's like the Valgavoth example, right? I was really proud of myself figuring
Yeah,
like for just like
that's amazing.
the also I want to point out I really like the sweater, the Acne Studios. It's nice.
Yeah, I didn't wanna buy it at full price. So I was very lucky to find a used one like a week or two ago because yes, priorities and stuff like that.
I do love Acne. But anyway, off topic. The overall though, no, I definitely think I need to do a better job of just thinking about my first instinct and like playing it slow. Because in both that game and the painter game right through the trophy, I I if I just thought about that more, if I just looked at what my opponent was playing on my little MTG bot, I would have won that game one. Now, obviously, who knows what would have happened in game two and three, but I ended up winning game two, and then I lost game three on a risky mull. Um, and you know, it feels pretty bad.
Yeah,
To be so close twice.
yeah. So two things before I let you go about that. I think it's good that you have that as kind of that's your motivation to try and improve for next time that you got close.
Yeah,
That's good because we also need to find out what motivates us. And for
yeah,
you, it's obviously this one because you feel like that was the only thing between you and whatever the goal metric was that specific day, right? So whether that's top eighting a tournament or winning a trophy or whatever the case may be, beating your arch nemesis, whatever it is that kind of matters to you. And then the second thing is probably most likely, I will say, during the four matches you won, there was probably a bunch of stuff that you both did well and got rewarded for,
Yeah.
or you kind of high rolled a little bit and got fortunate in some tight spots. So it's
Yeah.
mainly to stay balanced about how did you get into such a good position that you felt like you were one good play away from a perfect record. There's a lot of stuff that leads you there, both a lot of good choices that we need to celebrate as well, and a lot of stuff where we have to realize, okay, that was kind of lucky. My opponent mulled a 5 or missed their land or whatever, lost to a wasteland or whatever the
Yeah.
case may be, or we drew like, oh, second dreadnought, nice, you're dead, buddy.
Yeah.
It's just good to balance out the stuff, because players focus a lot on, exactly like you talked about, the losses, but I think there's as much to learn from the wins. Whatever is in the win or loss column is not too interesting. I think it's all the stuff in the middle that lets you there. So
Yeah.
just the
For
last
sure.
point of, yes, you are one misplay away from hoisting the trophy if we go to that exact time of like place on the timeline. But
Right.
before that, there are a bunch of interesting spots as well to dig into. This was just you highlighting a misplay that could have been in like your your O2. The same situation could have occurred, and it should matter as much to improve on that one. That's basically my point.
You're right. And yeah, I'm only focusing on the misplay because it was the relevant game. But in reality, that could have been any game.
But that's why you remember it. That's why you had an easy
Yeah,
time finding
exactly.
it. But it's also getting us closer to what matters the most for you as a Magic player. So that's why it is important, because we don't just live in this vacuum where everything is as important or the opposite. So obviously we need to find out what gets us going, and I think you brought some awesome examples, and we got to expose, or we got to, let's say, explore what kind of gap you're working with your whole context of streaming and getting older, working full time. You need to slow down and accommodate for that, basically.
Yeah.
So we got a little bit closer to which routine has to change to, let's say, minimize the risk of the same thing happening.
Right.
But that brings us to the end of today. As always, this is perfect. I get up at 5:45, and I always look forward to this one. It's a good one.
Well, you waking up at 5:45?
Yeah.
Chat is asking you something if you're in the chat right
Oh
now.
yeah. I'm not in the chat, so maybe read it aloud.
Magic Dad's asking is ask Eco about the time him and I played a vintage match. Ancestral Recall, that's all I gotta say.
Yeah. So, okay, this that's actually a good one. So from my point of view, I'm playing against Magic Dads. I played against that player numerous times in Legacy. So I basically greet him in the chat. I'm like, "Oh, welcome to Vintage. I hope you're enjoying the format," because I kind of feel like I'm not necessarily Mr. Vintage, but I'm at least a franchise player, and he's not. So, and he's like, "Yeah, Vintage has been fun. I think we're maybe 3-0, or we're pretty deep in the tournament." And at one turn, he cast Gitaxian Probe, targeting me. And then his next play is Ancestral Recall, targeting me. So at that point, are we talking about, misplay? Are we talking about misclick? Are we talking about mechanical error? So I just imagine, if I've never cast Ancestral Recall before, or very rarely, and I just cast a Probe where I had to target my opponent with a blue spell in order to get my card, there's just something about our brain and how that works. And chances are that he was a bit overwhelmed about Vintage as a whole. Chances are, if he didn't have the probe, he would have targeted himself. There's just so much small stuff that would never happen in paper. You cannot go Ancestral on you, buddy. Like, that's not something that can happen. So again,
Unless you're playing Doomsday.
okay. So I'm saying as a mistake, it can't
Yeah,
happen.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It can happen as strategy, of course. If you're playing against like a dredge deck with empty library, Doomsday player. I've even done it on an opponent when I had a Hull Breacher out, so I could hardcast my Sphinx of the Steel Wind, like as a ritual, basically.
If they're going
So,
for Infernal Tutor. Although that doesn't really happen in Vintage.
yeah, well, that's actually a very niche, but that'll be fun. So yeah, I remember that, but that's mainly like mechanical. What do I know? Oh, actually, a good one. I have another example from this weekend. I play Dual Commander. That format is very niche, but
I
anyways, my
no, I
opponent.
love Dual Commander. I've been playing a
Oh,
lot of
sick.
Atraxa.
Oh,
Uh,
perfect. I play against the Trax in the finals. my opponent has a Dream Halls in play.
Okay.
I have a Solitude that I want to kill their non-Atraxa creature. I can't remember which. And I have a Giver of Runes that I want to pitch, but I want to do it to Dream Halls and not to the Evoke thing, right?
Yeah.
So I obviously do the wrong thing and lose my Solitude.
Oh
And
no.
that would just never happen in paper. It's not like, oh, I'll exile this and it dies. Like it's a Magic Online thing, right? That you clicked the wrong thing and you obviously never meant for your opponent to draw 3 cards off Ancestral. So there's something about the interface, something about the mechanicals, and yeah, Magic Dad's. I think I even poked a little fun at him on Twitter afterwards. I think I can't remember if I won the tournament. I top 8'd anyway, and I was like, oh, by the way, thanks Magic Dads for the free Ancestral because that sure helped getting 3 extra cards there.
That's
That's awful.
funny. That's funny. No, Magic Dads is awesome. I'm sure yeah, he took it in stride.
Oh yeah,
Um,
definitely.
the but no, overall though, I think there is a I think that yeah, I definitely need to get better at you know, one, not getting tilted, two, uh just like thinking. I just need to
Yeah.
I need to use my clock more. To answer your question from previously, I definitely don't use my clock enough on Moto. Like,
I would have guessed that as well. That you end every match with 18 minutes on the clock without any like doesn't really matter like not a actual purpose aside from habits, right?
yeah, exactly. Just like, and sometimes when I get, we can save this for next session, but sometimes when I get overwhelmed with a decision, I will just make a decision instead of thinking about it more, and I'll frequently make the wrong decision as a result.
Okay,
And
that's interesting because everybody has these. Okay, we have 2 ways to go about this. I try to uncover as many pros and cons as possible, apply as much context when it comes to how did the game play out, and then I just feel like I'm rolling a dice in the end. But I would actually love to have more confidence in leaning one way or the other rather than a random decision, right?
right,
Yeah,
right.
that's a good topic for sure. I'll try and think a little bit about that. And as usual, let's keep in touch throughout the week because we want to make the most of this time, both for what's relevant to you and where I can offer the most. And we're keeping up a good quality here, so let's aim for that in the next week as well.
For sure. And another one I want to talk to you about is someone who also brews decks is just like, once you have a deck idea, is really solidifying it, not getting too attached to cards, thinking
Yep.
about the value, thinking about the different matchups, thinking
Yep.
about how you want to sideboard before you build the sideboard and register the deck. Because I'm now realizing that, because in paper, like, I don't mean in paper like paper, it's like on paper, I feel like sideboarding is easy. I want these good cards, they come in here, and now I'm seeing, once I'm actually in the sideboarding phase, I'm like, wait a second, this sideboard is not nearly as clean as I thought it was going to be. Like, for instance, in my head, I was thinking, oh, against mono red, I'll board out all my chalices and I'll bring in Hydroblast, clean sweep, easy. But now I'm playing against Painted, I'm like, oh shit. I kind of want my Hydroblast, but my chalice is also good in this matchup. And so we can talk about that. But
Yeah,
we can
that's
save
a
that
good
for
one.
next time.
That's definitely 2 good ones. Trying to, instead of rolling a dice, getting to a qualified decision and having confidence in that, and then also the brewing process from A to Z instead of from A to
F.
G.
Yeah.
I think that's some good ones. And yeah, I had a fun time as usual. Really activating my brain here, trying to share some experiences, staying true to what your path is looking like, and hopefully also asking the right questions and giving a little bit of food for thought.
Right. No, I had a good time. I learned a lot. I'm excited to hopefully put this to practice. I'm 3-0 in a league right now with this deck again, so I've got 2 more games to jam
High
before we
pressure.
see what
That's good.
happens. I've been in
That's
this
good.
situation too many times in the last 2 days.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Yeah,
uh,
let's
but
see if we
cool.
can make the most of it. Sometimes the games are up for grabs, sometimes they're not.
Yeah,
We
that's
want to
true.
win those that are.
True. All right. Well, Mr.
All right.
Andreas,
Yeah, thanks so much, Everin.
my
It's been a
pleasure.
pleasure, and I'll see you next week.
I'll see you next week. Have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon.